What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. And the MLB trade deadline just passed, so let's review it. Alright, so I'm not going to get into too much detail about all the specs of all these trades. I'm just kind of going to go team by team through the list and who they've acquired, who maybe they've dealt away. Just a basic recap of everything that's happened. If you like this type of stuff, please subscribe. It would mean a lot. But yeah, so starting off, we have the Baltimore Orioles, and they didn't really make too many moves. And the only real big move they made was getting starting pitcher Jack Flaherty from the St. Louis Cardinals. The Cardinals were one of those teams that dealt a lot away at this deadline, which I will get into later in the video. So yeah, Baltimore, they get a bona fide starting pitcher to help improve their chances at this postseason push. I know they're in one of the toughest divisions in baseball right now, battling with the Rays for first place. The Orioles are in first place right now. At least they were last I checked. But either way, that's going to come down to the wire in that division. That division is going to send multiple teams to the playoffs anyways, just to add another arm into that rotation to bolster your chances. Nothing wrong with that. Good trade for the Orioles. The Rays were another team that added a couple of arms. They brought in pitcher Adrian Sampson from Chicago Cubs. They brought in starting pitcher Aaron Savali from Cleveland. Definitely another team bolstering their rotation, getting arms in, getting ready for this postseason push, and hopefully making a deep postseason run. The Blue Jays made a couple of moves, mainly from, you guessed it, the St. Louis Cardinals, who were one of the big sellers at this year's trade deadline. At first, they brought in shortstop Paul DeJong. I know Bichette just had that injury, so the DeJong move's kind of just an insurance policy to make sure that everything's going there. And if the Blue Jays make it to the postseason, that they have a solid guy filling that role. They also brought in pitcher Jordan Hicks, so another bringing an arm onto that team. You can never go wrong with too many pitchers. I stressed that a lot in my MLB season preview videos months ago. A couple good trades for the Blue Jays to help improve that roster as well. The Boston Red Sox also made a couple of moves to bring in some pitchers. They brought in pitcher Nick Robertson and Justin Hagenman from the LA Dodgers, and they brought in infielder Luis Urias from the Milwaukee Brewers. I probably said that name completely wrong. I apologize. I suck at pronouncing stuff. If you watch my stuff, you know this by now. It is nothing new. The Yankees, they were pretty dormant for the most part. They did bring in pitcher Kean Middleton from the White Sox, a reliever, to add to that bullpen. They just getting Aaron Judge back from injury, so a lot of their guys will be returning, and hopefully they can make a push. That division is tough. It wouldn't surprise me in the least if the Yankees did miss out on the playoffs. But so they didn't sell, but they didn't get anything else. So they just kind of were like, they were content with staying put, which a decent amount of teams did. So moving on to the AL Central, the Minnesota Twins were another one of those teams where they didn't really do too much. They did a reliever swap with the Miami Marlins and brought in Dylan Florio. But other than that, they really didn't bring anybody else in at the deadline. Cleveland was probably one of the more active teams in the AL Central at the deadline, them and the White Sox. The White Sox were mainly selling, but Cleveland, they traded shortstop Ahmed Rosario to the Dodgers. In return, they got starting pitcher Noah Syndergaard, which their rotation right now is a lot of rookies and a lot of guys on the injured list. And then, like I said before, they traded Savali to the Rays. So they bring in Syndergaard, a nice veteran guy to add to this rotation. I know his year isn't looking great. He has like over 7 ERA. Cleveland also got infielders Gene Segura and Khalil Watson from the Miami Marlins in exchange for Josh Bell, but they will be cutting Segura to save money. And that was kind of just the move, was just kind of getting rid of money and just bringing in prospects. And that's another thing. I'm not really going to go over a lot of the prospects and returns in this video just because a lot of these guys, I have no clue who they are. Anyway, the Tigers really didn't do anything. They just sold a couple of guys. I don't think they brought anybody in of note. They just kind of stayed put and dealt a few guys. The White Sox, on the other hand, they dealt a lot of people away. And the only notable guy that they got in return was outfielder Trace Thompson from the Dodgers in a deal that I will get to later. So that was the only White Sox addition to their team. Kansas City Royals, they were another team that dealt a lot of players away, and their only notable addition that they received back was pitcher Taylor Hearn. But other than that, those bottom teams in the AL Central, Chicago, Kansas City, they just dealt a lot of players away. So the last division in the American League, the AL West. Now, this division was a fun one to watch at the deadline. The Houston Astros, the Texas Rangers were going back at it. They were going out and getting guys. The Rangers brought in Max Scherzer from the Mets. They brought in Jordan Montgomery from the Cardinals. They brought in Chris Stratton, also from the Cardinals. They got closing pitcher Aroldis Chapman. I know that trade took place a few weeks ago, but still, he was a big name to be moved, and he's been pitching good for the Rangers. But either way, Texas has been like, you know what, give me these pitchers. That division is close. I want to say it's within a game or two. But yeah, they're battling with the Astros right now, so it'll be a fun race to the finish in that division. But they definitely added the arms to help take this team to the next level and hopefully contend for a World Series. Houston was another team. They brought back Justin Verlander, another trade with the Mets. The Mets are just selling out at this point. But yeah, they brought in Justin Verlander to help bolster that starting rotation. They brought in Kendall Graveman from the White Sox to add to that bullpen. So they were getting pitchers in as well. They're like, the Rangers are getting pitchers, we're getting pitchers. This is just going to be a dogfight to the end. It'll be fun to watch. The Angels were another team that was, in my opinion, they were kind of like a surprise buyer to me. I know there was a lot of debate going back or whether or not Shohei Ohtani was going to get traded. He ended up staying put, which means I think the Angels think they have a good chance of re-signing him. But either way, they went out and got a lot of good guys to help bolster this team and maybe make a push for a wild card spot in the playoffs. They brought in outfielder Randall Grichuk and first baseman CJ Cron from the Colorado Rockies. So two really solid guys right there. And then they made a trade with the White Sox. You know, who would have guessed it? The White Sox for starting pitcher Lucas Giolito and relief pitcher Ronaldo Lopez. So I was kind of surprised at how much they bought at the deadline. But hey, they want to win now. They want to win with Shohei. So I don't blame them one bit. And the Mariners, they kind of sold a little bit. They didn't really do too much. They got rid of Seawald. They dealt him to Arizona, and they got Josh Rojas in return and designated hitter Dominic Canzone. So not too much to bolster the team for this upcoming year. I think they're just kind of ready to move forward with this season. They had a good year last year. It's been pretty disappointing this year, so they're just kind of ready to move on. And the Oakland Athletics, the last team in the American League that I have not talked about yet, yeah, they're just selling out. They know nothing's going to work for them this year, so they sold a lot of their players. And yeah, so that is it for the American League. So moving on over to the National League and teams that help bolster their rosters, the Atlanta Braves, they were pretty active. They brought in relief pitcher Brad Hand to help bolster that bullpen. They brought in infielder Nicky Lopez from Kansas City, pitcher Pierce Johnson from Colorado. They added a few pieces from bottom tier teams to help bolster their roster for the postseason push and a push for a World Series. The Phillies, they made one big move and they brought in pitcher Michael Lorenzen from Detroit. The Mets, they just sold so much. They got a ton of prospects in return, and I'm not going to really go over them because I don't know who a lot of them are. But yeah, the Mets just selling out. They had the most expensive payroll. What a disappointing year for the Mets. The Miami Marlins made quite a few moves to bolster their team as well. They brought in closing pitcher David Robinson from, you guessed it, the New York Mets. They brought in another relief pitcher, Jorge Lopez from Minnesota, when they did their reliever swap. They also brought in infielder Jake Berger from another team, you guessed it, the Chicago White Sox. And they also traded for first baseman DH Josh Bell from Cleveland. And the Marlins also brought in pitcher Ryan Weathers from San Diego. So they're kind of right in the thick of things, too. They're having a pretty underrated season. The Washington Nationals didn't really do much. They sold a few players, but other than that, they knew they were one of the bottom tier teams. Not really much for them to do. Moving on to the NL Central, the Milwaukee Brewers got outfielder Mark Canha from the New York Mets. They brought in Carlos Santana from the Pirates with a rare in-division trade. Also brought in relief pitcher Andrew Chafin from the Arizona Diamondbacks, who were a team that bought at the deadline. So I don't know really why they moved him, but hey, they did. Milwaukee benefits from that. The Cincinnati Reds also brought in pitcher Sam Moll from the Oakland Athletics. They they feel good about their roster, so they're just adding a few key pieces to make that postseason push as well. The Chicago Cubs brought in third baseman Jameer Candelario from the Washington Nationals, so they decided that they were not going to sell at the deadline and instead brought in a little bit of help. I doubt the Cubs do anything this year, but still, he's just a nice piece to add for the future. The Pirates are one of those teams that just sold out. The Cardinals also in that division, another team that sold out a bunch. And that brings me to the last division, the NL West. And the Dodgers, they were on a spending spree as well. Starting pitcher Lance Lynn from the Chicago White Sox, relief pitcher Joe Kelly, who was with the Dodgers before, also from the White Sox. They brought in shortstop Ahmed Rosario from Cleveland. So they were making some deals with the American League Central. They then brought back Enrique Hernandez from Boston which I know that trade also happened a little while ago. That wasn't like one of the deadline deals, but he's still a player of note that they did trade for in the past few weeks. They also brought in pitcher Ryan Yarbrough from the Kansas City Royals, so another one of those AL Central trades that the Dodgers made. The Diamondbacks were another team that added and got rid of a few people at the deadline. They brought in closing pitcher Paul Sewald from the Seattle Mariners. They brought in third baseman Jace Peterson from the Oakland Athletics as well, and also outfielder Tommy Pham from the New York Mets. The Giants added outfielder AJ Pollock and utility man Mark Mathis from Seattle. Like I said, Seattle was one of those teams that kind of just dealt away the players. They were waving the towel on the season. So the Giants, who are kind of still in the thick of it, they bring in a few guys to maybe help their chances. The San Diego Padres also brought in pitcher Rich Hill and G-Man Troy from the Pirates. So once again, the Pirates are one of the teams that was selling at the deadline. So they traded a few of their guys to the Padres. And they also brought in first baseman Garrett Cooper from Miami. And the last team, the Colorado Rockies, really didn't do anything. They just sold, got some prospects in return, and are just looking forward to the future. So yeah, that is my quick recapping of the MLB trade deadline. Let me know what you think if I missed anything. Hopefully I didn't, unless something happened like last second of the deadline that I missed in the recording of this. I apologize for that. So hopefully your team got who you wanted or got rid of who you wanted. But yeah, like the video, subscribe for more sports related content. God bless.